Hello, everybody, and welcome to the daily Pashupati show, where we discuss your well-being, health, and also your. We're nearing 100 episodes, and this is one of the special episodes where I managed to invite my friend Katie, who's um, who's an inspiration to me on her work with the environment, and she likes to call herself a weaver of pieces between the spiritual and the scientific world. She's a poet, a meditator, a yogini aspirant, a nature lover, and a PhD. So, welcome to the show, Katie, and thanks for being here.
Thank you, Ashwin.
All right.
I'm happy to be back, and I realized this is the second time we've had a talk on this topic, so it's nice to revisit it after a couple of years.
Yeah, that's right. That's right, actually.
Mhm.
Hmm. So I just want to I wanted to ask you, and it's always been on my mind to ask you this. How did all of this start? How did you get into this journey of maybe, I don't know, being anxious about the environment and then moving on into this place of let's do something about it? Was it like that? I'm just curious about how you got started. Do you mind
Mm.
telling us?
Okay, yeah, sure. Can you see my slides?
No. You just
No.
said
Is my screen isn't sharing right now?
no,
Oh,
it's not.
wait.
So just hit share.
Okay. Yeah.
Share screen.
Application
Choose the
window.
application window. Click on the
Okay.
application window and hit share. Yeah, I can see it now. There you go.
Okay, great. So
Right.
here's this is the answer to your question.
Is that you? Wow.
My connection with nature, with the environment started. Yes, this is me, baby me, and so I hope you can notice in both of these photos, I don't have shoes on. I never liked to wear shoes, and I like to run around outside all the time. And the shoe aspect is interesting because my dad worked at Nike for the first 15 years of my life, and I never wore shoes if I could help it. But one of my earliest memories was at this beach, the picture that is on the left there, and that rock in the background, it's called Cannon Beach Rock, and it's the second largest freestanding rock in the world after the Rock of Gibraltar. And around the base of that rock is the most magical area of tide pools. So every day with the tides, as when the water recedes, there are all these tide pools with sea anemones and starfish and crabs and fishes, and it's just like a child's dream. And one of my earliest memories was I was probably about the age in this photo. I left from my parents and I walked down there on my own, and I was down there for hours when I was about 3 or 4 years old, playing and just looking in these tide pools. And I had this realization that I just, it was like time was completely lost. I was just completely one with nature. And, I think it was getting dark. And then I realized, oh, maybe somebody's looking for me. I should probably go home. And luckily they didn't call the police or anything like that. And then my wandering days might have been over. But it was this moment of realization that and just love for nature. And so I think that's really where it starts is, where I think each one of us probably has some memory back in childhood. Maybe the connection has been lost now. I mean, we have this crisis of connection with nature in the modern world. But I think if people look back enough into their history, you can find some point in time where maybe it was like a first pet or or a walk with your parents or something, some moment when you realize you're really connected with nature. And for me, I've just kept that love throughout my life, and I really make it a part of my everyday practice to just be spending time in nature and appreciating nature and really not losing that connection. And I think that when we really love something, then that's the fundamental place where we can start asking questions. Because if we love something, then we care about it, then we want to make sure that it's healthy. We want to be doing the right things, and we can start knowing what are the right questions to ask about what is our interaction with the natural world. But if we're separate from nature, then we're going to be continuing down these same sorts of destructive paths. We're not going to be asking the right kind of questions.
Sure.
So that is where it starts. And so I have this question for everyone. How do you connect to nature on a daily basis? And from that, how do you respond? Because it's not about acting and reacting, but it's about a fundamental connection and being in a place where you can be responsive to the needs of the earth and those that are around
you. How do you know these needs? Do you kind of intuit it, or do you feel it?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have visceral reactions when I see the damage that's being done to the planet, and over the years, is what has driven me to be working on the issues of plastic and waste. Just realizing that it's such a need, and such an immediate need that we can begin to talk about. I realized for a while I was focusing on climate issues. And at the time, it was really hard to talk with, say, your average person on the street about climate change. Not everybody could have an opinion, have a firsthand experience around climate issues. But waste and plastics is something, anywhere you go around the world, everybody has an experience around waste and plastic. So I think it's an entry point to being able to talk about the environment and how we are living on the planet and how we are experiencing ourselves in the world in this time.
Well, yesterday I watched that webinar you sent me, and it was really scary. It was, it was really scary what it's doing to us. It's one thing when we think that we are doing something to the earth, and when we realize that we are the earth, we are part of it, and it's affecting us as well, and it's going to affect our health. That's when it gets really scary and becomes personal.
It really reframes the question, right? It's not what are we doing to the earth, but what are we doing to ourselves as earth?
True. Anyway, so can I just ask you, like, what are plastics? Because even I'm not too clear what exactly are plastics. What are they?
Sure. I have another slide for that.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So we could take a little bit of a deep dive into the world of plastics. So plastics are, they're based off of fossil fuels, right? It's a chemical reaction of the refining process, where when we're refining crude oils, the components of plastic is coming off of it. So it's actually, plastics are a boon for the fossil fuels industry, because you're getting a 2-for-1 basically. If you're taking the fossil fuels out of the ground, you're getting oil, and you're also getting plastics. And so that's a key component of the expansion of plastics. I mean,
So is that our only source? Is that our only source of plastics?
Right now, yes, you can make plastics out of other materials, because the core component is a carbon. So right now, the carbon that's being used in plastic is the fossil fuel carbon, but you can also use other kinds of carbons. Like, for instance, you could be making plastics out of sugarcane waste, or you could be making plastics out of hemp stalks. You can be making plastics out of any kind of biomaterial, and putting it through that kind of process. But right now, and how it has been made is as a byproduct of the fossil fuel industry. So plastics and fossil fuels are fundamentally linked. So, when people are talking about divest from fossil fuels because of climate change and the problems that our dependence on oil creates, that also fundamentally links to plastics. So I put up this little chart here. This is a basic kind of go-to, which is also very deceiving, but we'll just go with it for now. So these are the main types of plastic in the market. PET, number one, is very prevalent. Everybody is probably familiar with it. It's normally what you would get a water bottle is out of PET. Two, HDPE, high density polyethylene. This is also common for food packaging, also other kind of household packaging. And then number three is PVC. And PVC is can be a very problematic material, and we'll come back to this a little bit later. But it's one to definitely, so if you're looking specifically at the numbers, I'm cautious of all plastics, but ones that are specifically more toxic than others would be PVC, PS, number 6, and the big question mark compartment, number 7. Number 4s are often used for food packaging. It's also what often lines like the inside of packaging bags and things. It's a very lightweight plastic. Polypropylene also is very common, and then polystyrene is another one that's very problematic because of the different plasticizers that are used. In the 7 category, the other category, you can get a lot of chemicals in these plastics. But this is all it's kind of a rough guide because there is no standardization around the making of plastics. So depending on who the producer is, there's not a standard formula about, for instance, how much chemicals and how much other things can go into the plastic. So it really is a black box around what are a lot of the plastics and how much chemicals and other things that we are getting exposed to. And so that's I'm going ahead of myself, but that's what we were seeing in the webinar on plastics and toxicity, is that we're really starting to understand how problematic these plastics are. Unfortunately, there has been a policy of basically innocent until proven guilty with plastics, when we really should be having a precautionary principle where we're not releasing all this man-made material and man-made chemicals into the market before really understanding how they interact with humans as well as how they interact with the environment as a whole. And so in terms of plastic waste, plastic is talked about a lot in the various sizes that we see it breaking down. And so the sizes have to do with how we and other animals interact with the plastic. So we have very large fragments. We have macro, like the things that you see. We have meso, you don't really hear that term so much, but microplastics, you've probably heard the term microplastic. Yeah. That's especially like you get microplastics in like different shampoos. You can get microplastics in toothpaste. And then there's microplastics that are coming off of polyester clothes and nylon and all these things. And the microplastics have been shown to be very problematic especially for other species, because they confuse it in the ocean, they confuse it for food. But now we're starting to see that microplastics can actually be uptaken in the roots of plants. And for instance, they can be uptaken in the water cycle and they come down as rain. And we're realizing that they're spreading more and more and creating more problems. And then there's the realm of nanoplastics. And really, this is just starting to be explored. So it's almost, there's a little bit of irony in the fact that it's like, you know, if you have a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. Well, it's like the more we look, the more we are finding as far as the damage to plastic goes. The more, like basically everywhere we are starting to look, we're finding plastics. And realizing more and more, as the science becomes better, we're realizing more the amount of damage that has been done.
Wow.
And one of the biggest problems is that if we're thinking about the life cycle of plastics, is that we have a continued amount of production. So even though we're starting to realize these problems, a lot of the solution narrative goes towards, well, we just need to have better recycling, or we just need to have better waste management. When if we look to the front end of things, we have this exponential amount of growth in plastics, and also an exponential amount of growth of emissions from the manufacturing of plastic. But this is a narrative that is often, you know, the industry doesn't really want to talk about this. They try to deflect the blame and divert conversations to other things. But, you know, this is, Captain Charles Moore says that the plastic is the lubricant of globalization. Like the markets and the economy and everything is completely linked to plastic. And as such, plastic is put into this framework of perpetual growth, which is very scary when you think about all of the other things about plastic. So maybe you want to ask me one of your next questions before I go on too far.
So I just heard that you said that there are a lot of emissions as well. I wasn't really aware of that. And how does that affect us? Does it give microplastics into the atmosphere? Is that what's going on? What do the emissions actually
do? The emissions are coming from all of the processes that relate to the production of plastic. So we have emissions from extracting fossil fuel from the ground. We have emissions from the transportation of the oil to the refineries. We have emissions during the production of plastics. We have further emissions from taking the production of plastic to factories, from making things out of that. So every stage there is carbon emissions. But then, as we'll get into, at every stage there are potential. I mean, we wouldn't call it emissions, but there are microplastics that can be coming off of plastics, and there are also these other things that we don't see that can hurt us. All these invisible components of plastic that have been overlooked for the most part.
What are they? What do we not see?
Let's see. I'll skip the slide and we'll go back to it. So what we're not seeing, inherent in plastics, there are a lot of chemicals that are involved in the production of plastics. And a lot of these chemicals have been shown, not all of them yet, because it's, like I said, it's really hard to prove the guilt, especially since there are so many chemicals that are in our world right now that are being used. So it's very hard to single out specific chemicals and say this is causing that. So it's taken a long time for researchers to actually be able to say that certain chemicals are causing ill health in humans, or they're causing certain behavioral patterns in animals. So some of the really problematic chemicals that are in plastics are called EDCs, which is endocrine disrupting chemicals. And so some of these are phthalates, bisphenols, which a common bisphenol that people are probably familiar with is BPA, which some years ago there was a big stir around BPA because it was in like kind of like trekking water bottles. There was a really famous water bottle company called Nalgene in the US that had a big fallout because they had BPA in their water bottles. It was also found in baby bottles. So there was banning of a lot of BPAs, but unfortunately companies have switched to other kinds of chemicals. PFAs are also endocrine disrupting, and then pesticides and flame retardants. Pesticides are not put into plastics, but flame retardants are put into some plastics. So for instance, in like some electronic kind of materials, they would put flame retardants into them.
So I get a lot of patients, who come to me with endocrine problems. I think out of 800 patients that I've gotten, maybe about 90% of them have endocrine disruptions. That's how widespread it is. So that results in various problems like endometriosis or problems with cysts in the ovaries and all of those things. And for the men, it's infertility and erectile dysfunction and a whole lot of other things. So it's really common, guys. If you are listening, you probably already have endocrine disruption. And everyone's thyroid is messed up. Like everybody's thyroids are messed up. So it's crazy.
Yeah, so these are the different, so I'm not a medical doctor, but because this interests me, I pulled this up. These are the different systems of the body that are connected to the endocrine system. So it's fundamentally regulating our hormones and our moods and our reproductive functioning. The hypothalamus is like the big control center of the brain that keeps everything functioning. And like you said, the thyroids. So when we're exposed and chronically exposed in the modern world to chemicals that have endocrine disrupting capabilities, this is, even at lower levels, if we have chronic long-term exposures, then this can build up over time, especially. The research is showing, especially for mothers and young children, if you're exposed to certain chemicals at a young age, at a very vulnerable time, it can have really lasting damage.
But how do we expose ourselves to it? Is it by touching it with our skin or ingesting it, inhaling it? How do we expose ourselves?
Yes. Let's see if I have a good slide for that. So exposure can be coming from, packaged foods, things that we are packaging our foods in, but also, in common household items and things, like if we're, our kids are playing with a lot of plastic toys and things, then some of these chemicals are not bound in the plastic. They can come off and we can be exposed to them that way. And then just, what is around us in our environment, I think, there are a lot of questions about, exposure pathways, but like some of them, for instance, the PFAs, non-stick coating on pans is a big exposure pathway. So, cook with cast iron and other things that don't have any of that coating. Anything that's been coated in chemicals, like rain jackets, if they have a coating on them, different textiles and surfaces can have a coating. And I think it's one of these things, you just have to kind of take an assessment of what's around you and like, is it a natural material? Is it not a natural material? And if it's not a natural material, then you have to wonder, all right, how, what chemicals have gone into its composition? is this material touching my food? And start to think of it that way. I mean, they've found phthalate exposure, for instance, in like tubing, like even like tubing that they're using in dairy. That kind of tubing is the kind of plastic that will leach chemicals. Even IVs and things in the hospital, some of this tubing. So it's really, I mean, it's such a pervasive problem. You know, we have wholeheartedly embraced plastics in the modern world without realizing the consequences. You know, all of this material was just welcome with open arms. Oh, it's cheap, it's versatile, we can do everything with it. And, you know, we can make every shape, we can make every color, but, you know, we didn't look the gift horse in the mouth, so to speak. And there are these hidden consequences in this material that, you know, fundamentally it's a fossil fuel and it's made with chemicals. And we didn't stop to think what could go wrong.
So is it because of its reaction with heat that it starts coming off the material, or is it just its nature to come off?
Heat can play a part, especially in certain plastics like polystyrene, plastic number 6. That's like what some clamshells and food containers and cups, also like the boxes that are used to cool things. If polystyrene is a very fragile plastic, so if that gets heated and you have food in it, then definitely there are plastics that are leaching off. There are certain. Mm-hmm.
Is it a part of refrigerators?
I know refrigerant cooling is a greenhouse gas, and I can't say I know enough about refrigerant cooling. I know there are not good aspects about it, but I'm not sure exactly what all of those are.
They have something called a polyurethane foam, PUF, in refrigerators. So
inside, I think insulated. That would probably be a problem material. It's probably it is related to polystyrene, I'm guessing. That's usually polystyrene is used as an insulator, so it's maybe a cousin.
Thermocol polystyrene?
Thermocol. I'm not sure exactly what thermocol is. I'm thinking yes. I need to see it, and I can tell you if it was or not.
Shifted my house and I started buying new stuff, some things that I didn't have. I like a vacuum cleaner, and they all come wrapped with thermocol.
Like packaging peanuts and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very problematic. So I would call your local collector and see if there's somebody that takes it. But it's just a material that like really should not even be in our system. Because it's problematic from the get-go. I mean, it has a property that it's lightweight, it's easy to pack things, but now we have technology where we can grow mycelium, we can make mushroom packaging for electronics and these sorts of things that need to be moved.
I saw a video about that.
Yeah, I mean, or just use, shredded paper or other things, but we don't need to be, this is what we call, single use. It's like you use something once, and then what is the utility of it? It's going straight to the landfill, or it's being burned and releasing all kinds of pollutants into the air. So
when we put things into a landfill, does it go into the soil and then come out in our food through the plant?
Yes, I have a slide right here on that. So they found, so you get all kinds of things leaching out of landfills, especially landfills in this part of the world where you're not taking out really harmful materials like batteries and other things. So, but they have found all of these other invisible chemicals like PFAs are leaching out of landfills. They're going into wastewaters. PFAs are also, they're called forever chemicals because they don't go away. So once they're in the environment, it's very they circulate for a long time. So if the landfill is not capped at the bottom, they'll leach into the groundwater. It'll go into water body. It can go into the fish. We can consume it, and the cycle continues.
So is any fish safe to eat? Or all
I
of
mean,
them full of
there.
microplastic now?
Yeah, fish are eating microplastics. We're also in the ocean from coal burning. The oceans accumulate all of the mercury that comes out of coal burning. All of that accumulates in the ocean. So that's why they say that the larger fishes especially are very heavy in mercury content, like fish like tuna, fish that live longer and are predator fish species that are eating other smaller fish. So the larger fish, it's what we call bioaccumulation. So if they're eating a lot of other fish that have toxins in them, then that will accumulate in the flesh of the larger fish. And then if we eat that fish, then we are also exposed to it. So I mean, have caution with seafood. Definitely, if you're eating lower on the food chain, that's always going to be better. So smaller things that are that are not living as long, they're eating plankton or algae, and they're but even still, I mean, they've found microplastics in sardines and other things. So we do have to be aware of that we have been using the ocean as a dumping ground, and that is coming back to hurt us in many ways. Right. I mean, currently, right now, the amount of waste that is going into the ocean is enough to line every coastline in the world with bags of trash. Millions and millions of tons of waste we're putting into the ocean every year, and it's not necessarily getting better. Even though that there was an awareness, but it goes back to the production. If we continue to be producing material that has no other purpose but to be used and to be thrown away, it has a linear trajectory. Then it will either end up in a landfill, or it ends up in the ocean, or it ends up in the environment. I mean, it has to go somewhere. And wherever it goes, it's going to be polluting an environment. I mean, even if you burn it, you're polluting the air. So in some ways, you're spreading it worse, because maybe if you capture it all in a landfill until we figure out something better to do with it, at least things are captured in one place rather than spewing it up in the air or recirculating it. So we can all have more chemical exposure and microplastic exposure.
So, do plastics increase, pathogenic microorganisms? Do they support that or act as a substrate for these kind of organisms to grow, like mold and things like that?
So, in the marine environment, it's been shown that toxins and bacteria actually they latch on to plastics. So when plastics are in the environment, and they're what is called a vector. So you can have microplastics, for instance, that wash up on a beach that have been accumulating bacteria and things, and they bring that bacteria up onto the beach. So you can actually have outbreaks spread that way, as well as the bioaccumulation of forever chemicals. So plastics that are out in the environment, they're also accumulating more of these toxins if they're out floating around at sea.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's hard to swallow. I mean, it's a huge challenge. It makes you wonder, what have we done? What have we done to this beautiful planet that we live on? Why would we be so short-sighted? I mean,
I think I start my day by putting plastic into my mouth when I brush my teeth. The bristles are plastic.
Yeah, there's a great book. It's called Plastic: A Toxic Love Story, and she has passage in it where she documents, she's just thinking about how much plastic she touches in the first 10 minutes of her day. And so it's the same thing. She's like, oh, first I grab my phone and it's a plastic case, and then I flip the light switch and
Look
it's
at
a
me right
plastic
now with
light
this damn
switch.
thing. I have
And,
this damn thing on my head.
yeah. And then,
Otherwise, I can't talk to you.
your toothbrush, and then you're going to the toothpaste tube and it's plastic, and all these things. After 10 minutes, how many things do you have in contact with? And then you can, extrapolate that to your whole day. I mean, this picture here of these two boys, this was from an organization in the UK where they were trying to have people become more aware of the plastic that they're using on a weekly basis. So these boys, they collected all the plastic that they were using in their house, and in 1 week they had 407 plastic. 1 week, yeah, of the plastic, yeah. There's another photographer that's done some really incredible photos of families where they literally bring every single thing that's plastic. I mean, that's not tied down to their house, but everything that is plastic in their house that they can bring out, they bring it all out on their front lawn and take a photo with the family in the middle of all this plastic. And it really kind of, especially the people that are living in the North American or European context, and I mean, he's done this all around the world, but you see just how much plastic people are exposed to and reliant on a daily basis. And if we look back historically, I mean, 50 years ago, none of that would have been in the picture. It's crazy that how fast things have changed. I mean, if we think of human life on this planet, like plastic came around, in the 11th hour and 59th minute and 59.999999 second. Like, it's just been here a sliver of the amount of time. And the amount of damage that it's created, I mean, it is threatening life as we know it on this planet. I mean, if our ancestors had plastic, what would we probably wouldn't be here today.
Which brings me to this, like, isn't the epidemic of infertility, and I get at least one client a week who says that they can't have children. Isn't this like because of plastics?
Yeah, so that is what the research has been showing. So both you and I watched just this past week an interview with Dr. Shana Swan, who has been looking at this for several decades. And she herself had said initially she was skeptical. And I think that's the, scientists are not politicians. Scientists are not policymakers. They're not media people. They're not, scientists are people that come at things with a pragmatic mind. And they're not, essentially they're trying to be unbiased. So she herself said, at first I was skeptical. I didn't think that the plastics would really have, I wasn't sure of what their effect was. But over the past 30 years, they have seen steady declines, 52.4% decline in male fertility in the Western world. And
that's
so,
more than half.
Yes. And they are specifically linking it to endocrine disrupting chemical exposure and to plastics, and saying that if we don't change our behavior, the median can approach zero in the next 20 some years.
And wouldn't it even affect the quality of the sperm, the DNA itself? That would go down too, right?
So they're seeing a lot of health issues. So these are some of the things that they're seeing between in both males and females, but they were really highlighting what is happening to the males. I think also because that traditionally it hasn't been males that have been as focused on the environmental issues. A lot of the kind of action you get is from females who are more focused on the environmental connection. But I think this is a real wake-up call to males that, hey, it's cool to be aware of the environment. It's cool to, shop consciously and to think about what you're buying and to carry a reusable bag and all these things. Because there are some really serious implications on both sides. And in some ways, it's ironic. I mean, if we're polluting the planet, is this Mother Nature's way of saying, shape up, or I don't want you around anymore? But at the same time, this also raises a lot of questions around environmental justice, and because the people that will be the most affected are the people that are going to, that have more exposure, which are people that are in, disadvantaged locations that are exposed to more chemicals. And, they're saying that in the future, maybe more and more people are going to be needing in vitro fertilization if they want to have kids. And who are the kind of people that can afford that? Only people with a lot of money and not a lot of time to go through a process like that. So it really opens up a lot of questions of what is the future of humanity if we continue to expose ourselves to this amount of chemicals and pollution. Another factor is air pollution. Air pollution, actually, if chronic exposure to air pollution impairs cognitive ability. So we can say on both ends, we're making ourselves more stupid and maybe not able to have children with the amount of pollution. So, will people even be able to think about the kind of damage they're causing if people become, if cognitive ability declines? Most major cities, especially in the Asian context, that have air pollution issues. And what does that mean? Is, we are living on a planet right now where, more than half of the global population lives in urban environments, and every year that year is increasing. And so in these urban environments, we're exposed to air pollution, and we're also exposed to higher chemical loads because we're more removed from nature. We're, living a fast-paced lifestyle. People want convenience. They're opting for these convenient options, things that are highly cycle that has been created.
Okay. I have another question. Are there plastics in dyes that we use on fabrics? Are there plastics in them?
I know there can be plastics in paints and phthalates in paints. I'm not sure about plastics in dyes, but there are definitely a lot of chemicals in dyes. I know the dyeing process is really damaging to, for instance, soil and water quality in the places where they're doing heavy dyeing of fabrics like Rajasthan. If you're not using natural dyes, it's a heavy chemical intensive process.
And what about this plastic that gets mixed into the fabric, like this what do they call it? Poly something.
Polyester.
Polyester. Yeah, that's a plastic, isn't it?
It is. It's related to it's a PET. So PET, when it's broken down, you can make polyester yarn, or and that is the same kind of plastic that polyester is. And polyester has been shown to fragment into a lot of microplastics. And there's been a few studies that I think that are really relevant in the Indian context that have come out recently. For instance, there was a team from National Geographic that recently went up on top of Everest, and they found microplastic samples just below the summit of Everest, and then every other site that they looked at below there. So at about 8,500 something meters, they found microplastics, and the majority of those microplastics were polyesters. So it would have been coming off of clothing or sporting gear and that sort of thing. So, you know, it's kind of crazy to think that, all right, where people are going into these natural areas because we love them and we want to be closer to nature, but then at the same time we're polluting them with the very clothing that we're wearing. So just being in the environment, we're creating this damage. And then there was another National Geographic study that happened this past year where they went the entire length of the Ganges, and they were taking water samples and monitoring the plastic flowing through the river. And they estimated that between 1 and 3 trillion pieces of microplastic flow out of the Ganges into the Bay of Bengal every day.
Wow.
Every single day. So it's a river that's just flushing out all of these microplastic fibers, and that's not even including nanoplastics. So these are the ones that can be more easily measured. I mean, they're still very microscopic, but they're not at the nano level. So, you know, we don't even know what this is doing.
We don't even know anything.
We're just, you know, we can just say things like, all right, we know that for instance, okay, if this is all going into the Bay of Bengal, what is this doing for all this fish species that are there eating all these plastic particles? How is this, you know, is this affecting the acidification of the ocean? How is it affecting, I mean, we have not begun yet to even scratch the surface of what is actually happening in all these processes. But we can just say that even though, you know, that we're not controlling plastics, we can't contain it, that once we're using it, even if we're seeing an actual, if we're seeing an actual product like a bottle, it's not just the bottle, but there are things that are coming off of it at all times. And so in some ways, having a yogic mindset around this is helpful, because you have the physical material world, but then you also have the subtle and the more causal realms. So you can think about it in these different layers, that you have what is seen, but then also what is not seen. And sometimes what is not seen is so much more important than what we do see.
Okay, I have a question from Yuvraj, and he's asking this. We hear news that scientists have found plastic digesting bacteria, and do they show any promise as a solution to the problem?
Okay, I have another slide where I can go over something. So the industry has been, you know, one of the biggest problems is, you know, that we have our entire economy runs around fossil fuels and plastics. And so the people that are making money off of this have not tried to tackle the issue. It's basically been left up to the onus of people who care, who are trying to speak up against this to make people aware. And so there have been various tactics that have been employed by industry to take the blame off of them and to stall any kind of meaningful action. So we have tactics of delaying and distracting and derailing. And this delineation of these different tactics, this comes out of a really great report called Talking Trash. It came out last year. And so something like having organisms that are eating plastic, I would categorize that as kind of a distract. I mean, it's not as specific. It's not necessarily the industry that's doing it, but it's the kind of thing where if we look at the actual scale of the problem, and we're looking at a small pilot study of microorganisms that can, you know, slowly break down, it's you know, not even, it's like a tiny drop in the ocean. So I think it takes away the attention from what we really need to be talking about, which is stopping the use of plastics. Because I mean, and it's
Yeah.
also an end of pipe solution, because as long as we continue to use plastics, we're going to continue to have the exposure to all the chemicals that are within the plastics, and we're going to continue to have the micro and nanoplastics that are coming off of them. So any sort of solution that is looking at what we would call end of pipe, anything at the very end of use is not going to be addressing any of that.
Right.
And
Right. That makes
so
sense.
if we're really concerned about our health, and if we're concerned about the health of the planet, of other species, you know, we've just started to look at, you know, like we're starting to understand how the endocrine systems of humans are disrupted. But what about all other animal species? I mean, they're also, mammals like us. There are other species who are also a lot more sensitive to us. So we also have to think that, all right, we have the ability to reason and to act. We need to be stewarding the planet and not creating all this harm that is so hard to undo.
Great.
So yeah,
So now that our hope is out of the plastic bacteria, what can we do?
Well, one easy step, I think, is start from where you are. So everybody has agency where they are and what you choose to expose yourself on a daily basis. So although the plastics issue it's a systems issue, it's a macro issue, but it also comes down to you, your family, your community, your work environment, your school environment, your sphere of influence. So whenever you think, okay, the problem is too big, you can just take a step back and say, all right, well, where is my sphere of influence? And so, there are everyday products that we're using that we can start to assess. So like the boys did in this photo, you know, if you really want, if you're very curious, you could walk around your house and you could do a plastic audit in your house, and you could see, all right, what all am I using? And, you know, if you want to be more of an activist, you could do something similar at your work or at your school and start a narrative around that, or in your community. So some of these things that we're using right now, like masks for COVID, there was a study that was estimating 94 million masks are being thrown away every single day, single day. And it's so easy to just have a cloth mask that you wash. So that's one thing. And then, you know, what are your purchasing choices? Instead of opting for cheap plastic things that are going to break and go right to landfill and that are made out of questionable plastics, like plastic flip-flops and things, pay a little bit of extra money and get something that will last, that is not going to be exposing you or your family to all of these chemicals and this hazard. Same with dishware and toys. Like, there are all these potential places where we have purchasing power. You can make a choice, and you can also celebrate the artisans and the people in your town or your region that are making things that are out of natural products, like making ceramic ware, for instance, or making dishware that's out of bamboo and other natural materials. It's an opportunity to also connect with your local economy and to really support people that are making good products for the planet and that are also thinking about this. And, other things like diapers. For people that have families, diaper is such a huge thing. I like to say that if William Shakespeare, if he wore diapers, we would have his diapers around today. So you could go to an archaeology museum and you could see the diapers of William Shakespeare. I mean, that's the scope of the diaper problem. And babies, it's been said that babies will go through around 6,000 diapers in a couple years. So if your family is using diapers, you have already had a huge environmental impact by the time you're 2 years old. If all of your diapers are being saved for posterity. I mean, it's a simple switch
Mm.
that can be made, and stop buying as, as consciously. I mean, maybe you're not going to change everything right away, but little by little, start saying no to packaged foods. And it's also so much better for your health. You're not, having all this processed sugar and processed foods, and maybe getting a little bit more into the local cuisine. But yeah, the more that we can opt for holistic food choices, the more that you will be less exposed to the plastics that are involved in the packaging of foods. And similarly for women with their periods, if you're using pads or tampons, that's full of plastic. So you're harming your health when you're using these things, and then you're also creating this lasting legacy of waste. So there are lots of, these are just a few simple options, but like I said, I would start with a plastic audit and just start consciously seeing what it is that you're using on a daily basis, what is plastic, and what can you replace from that.
Wow. Okay, I'm going to do this.
Yeah. And in India, there are options that are more and more, the younger generation. There are entrepreneurs and people who are mindful of this in business, and there have been zero waste stores and zero waste consulting and these kind of operations that have started up to support refill and reuse and these sorts of options. So I suggest also reaching out to whoever is doing this in your area and help create a community around that. If you're taking this seriously, everybody can help each other, because it's not like, we should never feel like we're alone, but it's, if you're concerned about this and your neighbor is concerned about this, you can start talking about this together. It's a good way to make friends also.
Sure. And I have proof that when people stop using plastics, they get better. Their health gets better. Because I always advise my seriously ill patients to try going off plastics, and also other chemical stuff like processed foods.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure all of these things have a lot of plastic in them anyway. In the way it's made itself, because a lot of the machinery will have plastic parts, and it just keeps coming into it.
That
All
and
right.
anything with INS numbers, anything that has chemicals that are added, all of that is I just
What
say look at the back of anything, and if there's an INS number, just don't,
what's the INS? What's an INS?
because all of these INS are all the different additives that are added to food. So it's various preservatives and whatnot. So you can, I don't, there's so many different numbers. I don't know. In the US, it's E numbers, but here in India, it's INS. So you can Google them. If you find some product of yours that's packaged and you're curious what the INS number is, you can look and you can see what are the linked health effects and things. And it's just the sort of thing that you think about, that as we're exposed, I mean, there are thousands and thousands of chemicals in the system. And, it's one thing to be exposed to one, but if you're exposed to 20 on a daily basis, you can't think that doesn't have an effect on one's health. So I think the less that we can have exposure, the healthier that we'll be in the long term. And we won't have these chronic, maybe micro doses of things that are, progressively impairing our cognitive ability, impairing our fertility, impairing, other systems, our mood and whatnot. All of this has, small effects on us. So the more that we can be living without all of the processed and packaged and chemical materials, the better off we'll be in the long term.
How about plastics and the immune system? Does plastic have an effect on our immune system?
Yeah, I think that has to do with the endocrine system. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, the endocrine, of course,
Mhm.
has a lot to do with the immune system as well.
Yeah,
But
and
I've
then
seen
other,
people
you know,
getting. Mm, sorry, go on.
there's other toxicity involved. So, for instance, the burning of plastic. So, with this, I didn't get around to describing this picture here.
Mm,
There was just a
mm,
study that came out this past week on air pollution in Delhi, and they were linking the air pollution to a portion of the air pollution they were finding was actually because of the burning of plastic, and they were able to
wow.
link the chlorine molecule to the burning of PVC, which is it's a kind of plastic that has chloride in it, and
Yeah,
so
polyvinyl chloride. Yeah.
polyvinyl chloride. So they were able to say that the increase in the chlorine molecules in the air were directly linked to the burning of this kind of plastic, and so
Mm,
that creates respiratory issues, which would
mm,
weaken your immune system. So I think there are kind of some add-on effects there.
mm-hmm. And PVC is used to coat everything, like laminates on wood.
Yeah, like all of the billboards and things. So if
Yeah.
anybody's burning construction waste, a lot of hospital waste has that. Um, and yeah, it has a lot of toxic compounds in that one.
Wow. All right. So what's an alternative? I can't stop thinking that I put plastic into my mouth every day. So what do we go back
Yeah,
to?
you get
Doing a
a
piece of wood?
bamboo toothbrush. Yeah, bamboo toothbrush. You can
Bamboo
get them in India.
toothbrushes still
Yeah,
have plastic bristles, don't they?
some of them don't. You have to look.
Ah, okay. Because
Yeah.
mine does. I have a bamboo toothbrush. I've been using one for the past 2 years, ever since the last talk with you. And I,
Great.
I just noticed that they all have plastic bristles.
Okay, we'll try to find
So,
one without it.
okay, okay. I'll look. All right, great. Katie, I would love to go on, but I think we've talked a lot, and I didn't even realize we've run out of time. Uh,
Wow,
now,
yeah.
wow, it's 9:11. But I have a couple of questions from viewers. Can you take them?
Uh-huh.
Only two. All right.
Sure, sure. And
Here's the first one.
I have a final well, I
He
had
has the
other
question I wanted to ask you
okay.
about the emotional aspect of it. Can you call plastic
Uh-huh.
use an addiction? And is it making us want to buy more and more plastic?
Hmm. Um, I mean, I think humans are creatures of habit, right? So if you get used to using something, then you will continue to do it unless you're presented with something else that where you can change that habit. And like any kind of destructive behavior, you have to first acknowledge it's a problem. So if you're a drinker, if you're an alcoholic or something, if you don't acknowledge you have a problem, you're never going to get over it, right? So first you have to acknowledge that it's a problem, and then seek what can you replace it with. And that's been a big challenge because India has tried with the Swachh Bharat, they've tried to do plastic bans. And the one that was supposed to roll out, I think it was last year, it kept around Gandhi's birthday, it was pushed back. And a big question is, all right, well, we are using plastics for everything. And so what can fill the void? And I think India especially has a lot of potential because it's still within a lot of people's memory of how life was before plastic. The older
Yeah.
generation, they know what it was like to have refilled jugs and everything, and how they would shop,
Yeah.
and what things would be made of. So that is a potential to start going back to some of those
Yeah. Yeah.
practices,
I'm
but then
I'm
also
45 and I can remember this. I'm 45, and
Yeah.
I can remember how we went to shops and we didn't have plastic. There was just no plastic.
Mm. Mm. So, and I think the younger generation also is, with technology, you can also start to create other kinds of systems that can be like a modern, the modern rendition of the old, of the old system. So for instance, you can scan materials, you can have QR codes on things. So for instance, if you create take back systems where you have a reusable bottle that can be scanned in and scanned out of a system, like that's a modern take on an old practice. So there's kind of a way to merge what we were doing before with what we can do in the future. Also, our use of our knowledge about materials. I mean, there are so many different alternatives to plastics that can be played with here in India. So many different fibers and materials like bagasse and hemp fibers and banana fibers and coconut fibers. There's so many other things that can be used to be, used for packaging alternatives and alternative kind of plastics. That wouldn't have the chemical additives. Also, that needs to be a big part, because some of the plastic alternatives, they still have the chemicals, and so it's a big that's a big caveat of understanding that it's not just the plastics, the petroleum plastics, but that we need to cut the chemical load, the chemical use.
Yeah, especially things that make things look colorful, and they're all chemicals, aren't they?
Yeah, full of chemicals.
Wow. Okay. Legacy of plastic. Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah. So this is about, there's scientists are saying, how you can see the plastic stratified here in the earth layer, that we're plastic is a legacy of the Anthropocene. And some scientists are even saying, oh, well, we should call it the Plasticine, because we're actually leaving a layer in the earth of this plastic material that future generations will be able to go and see, this is what humans were doing. Like, they're not going to find pyramids, or they're not going to find nice pottery. They're going to find all this plastic material and say, what were they doing? And
there's this question from Shashank, and maybe others have it too. He's saying, how do I dispose of the single-use plastics that I already have?
Yeah, well, every municipality is going to have a different system. And I know COVID has really also rocked the collection and municipal systems. So depending on where you are, you'd have to figure out, who your local collectors are and what can they take. And very educational exercise, if you have some free time, is to go to your local landfill or dump and go to your local collection facility. And when you see what is actually happening, like you'd see something like this picture on the right, when you actually go there and you viscerally see, and it's such an experience to really, you see material and you can say, wow, I drink that kind of coffee, and there is the coffee sachet, or I have that, and it's there in the landfill. It's like a real moment of awakening to just see the sheer amount of waste that's generated. And once you see something like that, then you'll really begin to start questioning, how am I consuming materials, and how can I really reduce? And you'll understand how much of what we are generating does end up in the landfill, and what kind of solution is that.
That's great advice. I think I'll go do that.
Yeah, it's a great, anybody that's working with kids, I think, take the kids to the landfill, take them to see a recycling facility, get them to start asking critical questions and seeing, because one of the problems with waste is, yes, you do see it in the environment, but the bulk of waste is distanced. And so when it's distanced, then it takes away the responsibility. Oh, I can leave it on the curb, and then it gets taken away, and then I don't have to think about it. But if
Out
you
of sight, out
actually
of mind.
out of sight, out of mind. And it's somebody else's problem. You know, somebody else is going to be digging through my waste if I'm not segregating it correctly. So all these things become very real when you go and visit these sites, and you can see it. You see the people working in these areas, what they have to deal with, the amount of waste. You know, you see things that are potentially recoverable or recyclable or reusable, and they're just there and just wasted. You know, I like to say that waste is not a noun, but it's a verb. It's what we do. You know, it's not, we don't have any kind of material that specifically is waste, but it's our conception of material.
Yeah, it's what
It's
we do
how
with
we
it.
treat things. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Whew. That's been a heavy session.
Heavy
Yeah,
session.
but I think we need
Deep
it. I
dive,
think we all need
deep
it.
dive, deep wake up
Yeah,
call. Yeah.
yeah,
We
yeah.
need it. It is our, we are here in this moment of earth, I think, to become aware of these things. You know, we are here for a reason, and if we are awake living on this planet, if we are conscious beings, if we are responsible, if we are cognizant of our place in this universe, then these are the kind of things that we need to be fully aware of moving
Hmm.
forward.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I get it. I also think it's part of our own spiritual evolution. If we can't take care of our environment, and we don't see the connection of ourselves with the environment, then that isn't what spirituality is about. Because we need to connect with our environment to even call ourselves spiritual. So I
Yeah.
think this is the next evolution that we need to make.
I think
You
so.
know,
I really feel that waste in a lot of ways is a physical manifestation of unconscious living on the planet.
yeah, yeah.
So when we wake up, then we realize, you know, what needs to happen for taking care of this issue. But because, you know, there's a crisis of consciousness, we have this crisis, this critical moment of waste that we
It
have
is
to
a
deal with.
crisis of consciousness. That's exactly right. That's what I was trying to say. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Okay. You know, I can have uh, tingling in my 10th chakra, but if I then go and I don't segregate my waste, or I just drink out of a plastic bottle, then what's the point?
Yeah, there's not going to be anybody left in future generations to have any kind of realization after you. You could be
Yeah, there's going to be
the
only
last
chakras. There's
generation.
no people.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right, Katie, we'll have to call it a day today. But what a day it's been, and thank you so much for coming here and telling us straight what's going on. So I hope this reached everybody's heart, and uh, I hope it scared the hell out of you. So so that we can start doing things about it. And yeah, uh, I'll be back with the next episode tomorrow. It's going to be a short one, light one, the ones you like. But there's this. I wish a lot of people watch this one, and I think it's a significant episode that we've had. Thank you so much, Katie, for
Thank you.
being here.
Thank
All
you.
right,
And
see
yeah,
you.
if people have questions, they can field them to you after. I can answer them also. I'm happy to.
Oh yeah,
This is
great. So
a journey
if you
that
have
we
any
all are on.
questions, yeah, yeah, absolutely. If you have any questions, just send them to me, and I'll forward them to Katie. So yeah, thanks for that, Katie. Thanks for
I'll leave.
the.
I love this. This is the last image that I'll leave everyone with. That we can move into this aspect of Seva with the earth and our planet and our relationships with each other.
Mhm, mhm. Seva. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. Yeah, that's what my name means. Chekoa, the one who serves. Yeah,
Appropriate.
yeah, perfect. Yep, great image to end today, and thank you so much, Katie. Let's end
Thank
today.
you for having me.
Yeah, yeah. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks.